What is something you can't believe people like? People who are enamored by currently incarcerated murderers. The fact that people write fan letters or letters of love to people who have murdered their spouse and loved ones is insane to me. Anyways, I had a brain tumor this summer, had it removed, and it faffed with my taste buds to where everything tasted bland. The right side of my mouth still only have a metal taste. Anyways, last week, I was a guest at my friend's house for breakfast. It's always a fear of mine because of the possibility of onions being in the food, but I went and didn't want to be rude, so I ate the chili that was made. My taste buds became alive. For the first time since my surgery, it tastes all these lovely flavors and spices. Knowing it was chili, I pretty much assumed it had onions in it, which it did. Anyways, after that chili, I don't know what to think anymore. Ugh, I recently saw a video of a mom that made her daughter alphabet chicken nuggets. She arranged them on her kid's plate to spell asshole. She asked her egg donor what it said and the mom said sound it out. So the girl did, and instantly her face dropped and she started bawling. Her reaction, Imo said, "My pathetic mom does stuff like this to me all the time, and it really hurts me," and she's filming it and laughing at me like it's hilarious, which makes it 100x worse. People torturing their kids or anyone on the internet for likes makes me so goddamn angry. I blew up at my mom for doing this to my young siblings. Always taking photos to post, and you can see how much they hate it, how forced their smiles or how awkward they feel. Same shit she put me through. They're all much younger, and I'm in my late 20s. Last time I saw my mom, she tried to take a picture of my little bro. I saw him literally feeling all the same emotions I did as a kid. I could see my own trauma happening to someone else in real time before my eyes. I lost my shit, told her to stop, the kids hate it. I hate it. Later that same day, gave my sister a hug, and she made us both stop for 100th cute photo of the day, which actually completely ruined it for both of us. I used to try and be there and make an effort, because I wanted to be a positive impact on my siblings. I've realized now that watching the trauma repeat is just compounding my own trauma, and I need to be away from me. But not a day goes by where I don't feel guilty for abandoning them. I know what growing up with her is like, and I don't want anyone to go through it. But I don't have the strength to be there. Thing is, on the surface sounds like I'm being a miserable shitty, but just so sick of being used as my mom's self-validation and sick of seeing her repeat it with them. Sorry, this wall of text came out of nowhere, and I just vented all my shitty at you, random stranger. I did not mean to, but once I started, I couldn't stop, clearly needed to get it off my chest. I can't understand people liking onions. They burn your eyes. When you cut them, they mean death. For a sensible digestive tract, they are pretty weird. But I also don't understand it about spicy food either. I guess people just like what triggers their taste buds in some way or another, whatever the taste. People that make everything political are generally whack jobs like Ted Bundy. That is profiling at its worst and hateful. Like saying you must be a liberal to say such hateful and discriminatory things, and hate your fellow Americans if somebody disagrees with you on anything. You probably don't do anything for anyone but yourself, and make excuses for your life and how bad it is. So if you're hateful like this comment suggests, you must be a Democrat. This is definitely a hateful comment. This is embarrassing. I hope you're not American, as I'm not blue or red. I'm red, white and blue. As soon as I hear comments like this from anyone over political views, which are generally based from the media, which takes the worst things in somebody's life, murder, child abuse, rape, school shootings, etc., and uses them for entertainment value, and then uses them to promote their political agendas when those things are nobody's business but the victims. Our media and Hollywood are disgusting to make money off people's personal tragedy and making movies and books about serial killers says they care absolutely nothing about the victims. It is one of the most heinous crimes of all. It just makes me sad. How are people ever supposed to heal and move on with their lives when their traumas are posted all over the media and TV indefinitely? People like this are trying to destroy everything that is good in this country. If people don't like it here, they have the right to leave. We created this country to get away from the exact thing this comment stands for. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not promote this kind of sickness or give any type of glory to other people's tragedy. Let people heal and pay attention to cleaning up our own backyards. I don't necessarily like all my family and we disagree on a lot, but I love them dearly. I want them happy and successful. I don't want nothing but the best for them. I truly hope this for everyone, whether I agree with you or not over same issue that doesn't even pertain to me. To be fair, she had already been with him for years and had no idea he was a murderer, and when he got arrested, she believed him when he said he didn't do it. Then he got convicted, and she stood by him and married him while he was in prison. She just believed he was wrongly convicted. Eventually, her denial broke, and she divorced him a few years before he was executed. He was with the girl with the kid before he was arrested. She turned him in on suspicions and left him. He then married and had a child with someone else while he was incarcerated. That woman eventually left him too when he was found guilty. He was a manipulative asshole. But there were fangirls outside of court that were sickening. The girl with the kid did report him, but nothing happened. The cops literally told her, "We don't have time to talk to girlfriends." Later she tried to report again, and the cops told her he already been cleared, so again, happened. Then he started dating the woman who eventually married him in prison. They dated for quite a while before he actually got arrested, so she had no idea of his crimes. But yeah, there were fangirls who showed up in court who had purposely styled their hair to look like his victims, since apparently he always raped and murdered women with long brown hair parted in the middle. This guy Ryan Widmer was tried twice by the local cops for murder after his wife died in the bath, apparently from narcolepsy. The juries weren't buying the cop story and hung twice. While he was in jail being tried, this woman started writing him letters and they talked on the phone sometimes. When he didn't get convicted or marry her, she told the cops that he confessed, and her story convicted him at his third trial. His ass is in there right now. There's some really deep psychology involved here. One of the reasons people find killers attractive is because, if they're with me, then that means I'm safe from them. I don't quite understand that thinking, but then again, I didn't grow up abused or in fear. If I did, I might want to feel like the scariest, meanest, and most violent person around is taking care of me. You can also combine the above with someone who also has issues with intimacy. If your partner is locked up for life, then you get all the emotional benefits. Insamuk, as a person who thinks like this, would see it without having to deal with them being around. I recall listening to someone talk about why it happens. She was saying that it was because they are so dangerous, but because they are behind bars they are safe, and they are completely focused on the girl. There is also no negative stuff associated with the relationship. There's no cooking, cleaning, dealing with his bullshit. He's the perfect boyfriend. Are they though? Interesting that is. Many don't know themselves why their brain is wired the way it is. Many have a middling education, almost all are not verbal wordsmiths. Not only from the angle they are horrid misogynists, but they aren't charming, and none but two, that I recall, are subjectively attractive. It is a wild-ass mystery what these women are doing, but have you ever seen screenshots of romance scammers' texts? It is riddled with bad grammar and platitudes, "You know I love you baby," and the women hand over thousands of dollars. The Rookie had a neat side plot about this in one episode. Convicted murderer gets out of prison and moves in with a woman he had been writing letters with. He gets poisoned a few days later, and everyone starts assuming it was a prison grudge or revenge from a victim's family. His girlfriend had assumed there was no chance of him ever getting out. His early release suddenly turned her long-distance bad birth fantasy into an uncomfortable reality, and she couldn't handle it. It's a way of flirting with danger while risking nothing. The women writing letters are often victims of abuse and gravitate toward aggressors. Getting involved with a man behind bars puts them in positions of control. These women will most likely never have the chance to meet the man they're pursuing, and if they did, they'd be protected by the prison system. I would take this one step further. I don't understand people who enjoy true crime. I know it's a morbid fascination, but the whole "stay sexy, don't get murdered" thing and crazy fans is weird. Murder and suffering is just not entertaining to me. It's so sick to think about people dying in scary, painful ways. Same on the not enjoying murder and suffering. I get sick and uncomfortable when I see people suffering in fictional movies, but to know that real people went through horrible things is enough for me to stay away from true crime. I definitely wouldn't want to know all the gory details. I'm a 28-yo white woman, so I'm supposed to be obsessed, and everyone I know listens to it. It straight up bores me lol. When I was in college, I had an internship with an attorney, and my job was actually to format into Excel info about unsolved murders in my state. Quite a romantic and intriguing internship, yeah. But eventually, you realize that people usually not super brilliant or interesting people, just really faffed up people just go out and do sick shit. It's way easier to get away with murder than people think, which is terrifying. But you do not have to be some sort of super genius. Most killers have below average IQ because they're simply really mentally ill. The type of genetic mutations and trauma that cause people to do these things almost always compromise IQ as well. People think that anyone who gets away with murder is fascinating because how could you escape the police? Sorry to tell you this, but disappointingly easily. It's mostly luck. It's way harder than it used to be, but still pretty easy. It just reminds me of like seeing the faffed up bully kids in school who were usually also on the dumber side, and that's an understatement, get a thrill out of hurting people or running over cats. 90% of the time that just adults, and more extreme. They just want to feel powerful and the wires in their head are faffed up. For me, it's the sadistic idea of it not happening to them, and at the same time they get to be involved and watch it from their couch. Kind of like gawking at an accident on the road while slowing down to cause traffic. People aren't worried about the people that are suffering, they're happy it isn't happening to them, and sad they can't stay longer to watch. Back when there was public executions, people would gather and watch that shit like it was better than Netflix. It's not really about the murder, it's about the feeling of security true crime entertainment is designed to evoke. In the olden days, Unsolved Mysteries Forensic Files Dateline, it was about saying, when people do bad things the police will catch them. Even unsolved crimes were presented as part of an ongoing investigation, and with a certain implied inevitability that the police would eventually unlock the clues. Currently public opinions about police are more divided, so modern true crime is more about a public defender with a heart of gold will fight tirelessly to overturn a wrongful conviction, or the internet will find the bad guy and make the police listen, or whatever. But it's all still about pushing a narrative that the world is fair and justice will be served, and a lot of people find that comforting. I work in a prison, deal with horrific things. I've interacted with several killers of the breakfast food category. I cannot understand why laypersons are interested in these people. They're not worth anyone's time of day. I'll never abuse them, I'll never do anything except treat them professionally, but there's just nothing else to them to invite any curiosity in my opinion. Think of John Wayne Bobbitt. The guy was such a horrible person that his wife cut off his penis and drove down the road and threw it into a ditch. When she was charged with assault, even though she admitted to doing this, the jury decided that it was a reasonable reaction to the way he treated her and found her not guilty. This has to be the most sure indication that he would not be a good husband. Then several women proposed to the guy. It's really dumb, but I at least understand it. People are just blinded by beauty. If a woman prisoner who looked as conventionally model hot as that guy who got famous somehow blew up, you'd get a million simps, and nobody would be confused at all. People are attracted to danger, and also just to fantasy. It's easy to idealize someone who's in prison, it's easy to romanticize, especially because you don't actually have to live with them. Then a bunch of loser women are simping for a guy straight up, because he's hot, and nobody knows why. Society is weirdly in denial about the fact that women are as hardwired to be into attractive men as men are into attractive women. Lamau. It's the results of thousands of years of men having literally all the power and women being forced to choose men according to their ability to feed their children, or those men just having the means to buy those women like cattle. But it isn't nature law. I actually have a minor in anthropology, and in hunter-gatherer societies women have no more incentive to go after resources of a mate than men do. It's a myth that men used to hunt, women used to gather. Both did both. But most importantly, the tribe would bring back all the resources and distribute them equally, and it did not matter one bit who your dad was. People still tend towards monogamous relationships, but in general in most hunter-gatherer tribes, many of which are still around, it isn't stigmatized at all to sleep around casually and just get pregnant and not even know who the dad is. Women became forced to choose men based on very recently in evolutionary terms since the advent of agriculture, which has been far from uniform across populations. Anyway, my point is people like to say women are programmed to seek a mate who has resources, men are programmed to seek fertility, but that is not our monkey brains lemma. Also, men's age affects the child negatively at almost the rate as women's age. So we're equally wired to value youth if you take away social constraints. Sorry I'm buzzed right now and rambling, but point is, most human beings are still gonna be attracted to mates according to both the physical and mental, and most of us are appalled enough by faffed up criminals enough for it to override our attraction to their symmetrical faces. But you're gonna have tons of both men and women who are faffed up enough to be completely hypnotized by just the physical. But people just can't acknowledge when that's happening with women, even though it's insanely obvious. It's called bad boy syndrome. People find criminals attractive because they're like the bad guy, they do what they want, go to prison, and therefore have a certain reputation. It's sick admiring criminals, but I do get why they find them attractive. But the whole fans are really sickening, and especially people finding them attractive for killing human beings. I had a best friend who wrote letters to an incarcerated sexual offender, fell in love with him, and then started dating him once he got out. That only lasted a few months though. I still don't understand it to this day. I think she has incredibly poor judgment, but she says that 1-year-long saga doesn't define how good her judgment is. I extend that to the whole true crime fandom, which is popular enough to get SNL song parody. It is such an unpleasant subject to get enamored with, in my opinion. I mean, I probably know better. My interest is military history, but it contains a lot more facets than blood and guts, vehicles, tactics, and politics, to name a few examples. True crime is to me a deep dive into something so terrible and intimate, a grisly deed done to one or a handful of people. I have a friend like that, but unlike most, she doesn't sense tea or forget that these people murdered people. She's always interested in lions, places that were abandoned, stories of faffed up tea that shows the truth, and she likes to read into people who've murdered others. She will find some of these guys attractive, but still has boundaries since she won't forget that these are people who let others. If anything, she's like to more positive version of those stupid ass fangirls sending letters to these killers. They must be cut from the same cloth as the type of people who try to come forward to confess to murders they didn't commit. It's one of the things that really muddied the water for cases like the Zodiac or Ted Bundy. So many people tried to claim credit for the murders. For real, I get that. On the other end though, like everyone got really upset when a relative of mine married someone who was convicted of murder off a plea. But the guy murdered a potentially abusive but unconfirmed by the court man whose wife he was entwined with. The best way I know to describe my opinion on the matter was a combination of, he's done the time, and, I mean, me he's too much husband material. Also, he's great with the kids, treats them as his own. I am curious, but in an appalled way. I cannot fathom how these people can physically do these tasks. Killing to me is the equivalent of, like they say, biting off your finger. You can theoretically do it, but your brain will not let you unless something is horribly wrong. It's something so atrocious that it invokes curiosity as to how it is possible. It additionally sets up a horrible situation of death and destruction and leaves you with a subhuman entity that you have to find a way to effectively deal with, so they do not kill again, while also trying to avoid stooping to their level. I'm interested in murderers, more specifically serial murderers, but damn, I like looking at it from a mental standpoint. What makes their brain fire off in the way it does? Why do they do it? People who are fans or love them scare the faff out of me. They also have something deeply wrong in their heads. I just think people see it as like a movie or something, and don't realize that actual people's lives have been affected. Kind of like how beef comes from cows and pork from pigs. If the death was actually seen, maybe they would change their minds. Plus, killing people takes a level of courage that the peaceful majority don't have. Murders are as rare as unicorns. My professor in university for my legal psychology courses was actually married to a lifer. She met him while she was doing counseling in prisons, and apparently just became so in love she married someone doing life. Needless to say, her course was heavily slanted in a certain political direction. It was interesting because the whole time I was in her class, it felt like all of her coursework and discussions were heavily leaning one direction, and it wasn't until after the class and I was hanging out with a couple of her TAs that I learned this. While we were boarding a plane, and I was in the aisle heading to my seat, a guy already seated was live streaming and angled the selfie cam to include me. I was bullied a lot in school, so I know it wasn't for a good reason. I turned away and he said some insults in Spanish. Really obvious ones. It hurts, but more than anything, I feel sad. There are places where people can grow up into this. I was bullied a lot as a kid, usually for my weight. I've never been small. I lost a lot of weight after high school, after I was kicked out of my home by my mother's friend. We lived with another family. Their name was on the lease. My mom's hands were tied. Food became scarce as I lived at a rescue mission for about a year. A lot of good people there. All of them suffered great losses and, like me, had nothing to their name. Didn't stop them from giving what they had. I figured that was what being an adult meant. I enlisted in the army because no one else would hire a homeless 18-year-old. Got to basic, and it felt like I was in school again. Cliques were formed. Bullies well into their 20s were a thing. A lot of posturing and arrogance. It honestly baffled me.